is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative and creative individuals who are helping to shape the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in ranch brokerage and land conservation, or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, pretty much anyone who's doing important work and has an interesting story to tell. My guest today is Joe Grant. Joe is a highly accomplished professional ultra runner and all-around endurance athlete who's completed some of the endurance world's most challenging events. That includes several Hard Rock 100s, the UTMB 100, Western States 100, Bighorn 100, as well as the Arizona Trail Race, which is a 750-mile mountain bike race, the Iditarod Trail Invitational, which is a 350-mile foot race through Alaska in the wintertime, as well as many, many more. He recently completed the Tour de 14ers, which is a solo, self-supported, and self-powered link-up of all of Colorado's 14,000-foot mountains by bicycle and on foot. And for those of you counting, that means he climbed 57 14,000-foot mountains, all accessed by bike, in just over 31 days. But Joe's career as a professional athlete makes up only a small portion of his personal identity. He's a talented writer and photographer, as well as a voracious reader. He was born in England and grew up in France, so he's got a global perspective that gives him a unique point of view. He's obviously driven to pursue challenging goals, yet he's always been focused more on the process than the end result. His athletic achievements seem to combine his desire for continued personal growth with a genuine love of wild places and a conservation ethic. Because he's got such a depth of knowledge on so many interesting subjects, talking with Joe solely about running would only begin to scratch the surface. So after a rundown of his recent 14ers adventure, we dug deep into his thoughts on adventure, endurance, and pushing one's personal boundaries. We talked a lot about his upbringing and how his family and friends have helped to shape his outlook on life, giving him the confidence to pursue an unconventional yet extremely fulfilling lifestyle. We obviously talk a lot about books, as well as goal setting, daily practices, and his thoughts on conservation. I'm obviously biased, but I love this conversation, and I really appreciated Joe taking the time to chat. I encourage you to check him out on social media and read some of his columns. I have links to all that and other info in the episode notes. So if you like people who are passionate, humble, deep thinking, and all around interesting, you'll enjoy getting to know Joe. So here you go, Joe Grant. So the way I've been starting out these interviews is kind of the normal question you probably get a lot. But when you meet somebody, you never met them before, and they say, well, what do you do? How do you answer that?
Usually I just say I'm a professional runner because I think it's like typically the easiest answer.
Sure.
In practice, what that involves is I get some money from sponsors, I get some money from coaching, I get some money from writing, and a little bit on the photography as well. And so it's a little bit more of a piecemeal kind of job. Being the outdoor industry is a tough industry to be in, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is it's difficult to make a living just being straight runner because it's very performance based, and you're either running well and you're getting paid to do that. And in trail running, I think it's a little bit broader. Like there's this kind of an ambassadorship piece that is sort of required of athletes.
Sure.
On a personal level, I actually like that because it broadens the scope of intellectually, artistically. There's all these other things other than just being a runner, and so that's kind of important to me to stay engaged.
Sure.
So the short answer would probably just be like I'm a runner, but the longer one was there's all these pieces that kind of feed into making that lifestyle possible.
Yeah, and that is exactly the reason I wanted to have you on here. And this is the first time we met, but I've followed your writing for probably, ever since I moved to Boulder, so over 6 years, I think 5-6 years. And so that was one of the things I thought was so cool, is that you're obviously an extremely talented endurance athlete, and you're more, as we'll talk about, you do a lot more than running, but you also have all this broad range of interests that I've kind of been able to absorb through your social media and your writing. So that's what I wanted to hit on.
Sure.
I think probably the first thing we could talk about is your most recent project, the 14ers.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So basically, the idea behind the 14ers project was to I'm fortunate to travel a lot for running, and I get to go to really amazing places, and I love that. But every year I kind of have this, I want to explore Colorado more. I have so many things I want to do in Colorado, and that I always kind of feel like I push back to the following season. And the seasons are quite important. The summer, the high country opens up, and certainly you can be in the mountains in the winter, and I spend a lot of time in the mountains in the winter, but it's different. And there's all these summer projects that I wanted to do. And so I think, it started with kind of this need to sort of commit to a project, put it on the calendar and say, okay, next summer I'm doing this, The inspiration behind it, I mean, the 14ers are, iconic to the state of Colorado, and they've been done in a many, many different ways. I like the sort of the style that Justin Simoni did it in a couple years back, which was biking to the peaks and then running up it. So kind of this self-propelled, way of linking the peaks. I thought that doing the record in doing car to summit, driving to the trailhead and running up, was a little bit logistically too involved for me.
Yeah.
And just a lot of sleep deprivation. Just it's a different kind of style. So I like the aesthetic of kind of starting from my home, pushing off.
And for people that don't know, how many peaks?
There are 54 14ers, and there are 4 additional ones that are named, but that aren't recognized necessarily as distinct peaks because of the difference between the neighboring summit.
Sure.
So there's 58 that are recognized with a little asterisk on those 4. Yeah. I did 57 because Mount Bras is close to the public.
Okay.
So in that group, and it's a contentious kind of thing, but I just decided that there was a bigger implication to doing that peak.
That makes sense.
At a community level that I didn't feel like, I was entitled to it or anything. So, so I did 57
That's awesome.
peaks. And so the idea was just to leave from home and tour the state and, go up the mountains. And I like the idea that traveling by bike allowed me to carry my gear, and quite a lot of gear, that would be heavier on my back, to basically transfer it to the bike and then be able to cover a relatively good distance. 100 miles on a bike isn't that bad, whereas on foot, it might take you, a couple, 3 days, and that would be, kind of moving. So I like the fact that the bike allowed me to move slowly enough to appreciate things and to kind of experience things at a nice pace, but also actually cover some distance and be able to, get to the peaks a little bit more. Because I didn't have 3 months to take off.
And so you were completely self-supported. You didn't have anybody out there bringing you gear, no supply drops or anything like that. I mean, were you buying, like you go to a gas station and buy as many calories as you could?
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is I've sort of followed the bike packing ethic of racing, which is basically do it yourself. So the idea is that anything that is open to anybody, like you can get a hotel, you can go and resupply in town, as long as you're the one who is getting yourself to that spot.
Got it.
There's a few. In this case, there's a few people that met me on the peak randomly.
Sure.
Like it wasn't, so if it was a planned thing, I couldn't accept any assistance.
Yeah.
But if somebody met me just randomly at a trailhead that I didn't know of, kind of a trail ferry, which was like, oh, here's a half a sandwich or something.
Sure.
That type of thing is okay. But I couldn't call up a friend and say, hey, could you meet me here with some new shoes? And so I mailed shoes to Buena Vista for the halfway point to pick up there and that kind of thing.
How many shoes did you go through?
Just 2 pairs.
Oh, really?
So I wore my I run for Scarpa, and I wore their running shoe, their lighter weight running shoe. That's actually going to be available next year.
Oh, cool.
The Spin. I wore that for the first half. And then the second half, I wore the Scarpa Atom, which is a comparable kind of shoe.
Nice.
And so just 2 pairs of shoes, and then I had my and then bike shoes as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the highs and lows you experience in that. I mean, I guess if anybody's used to it, it's you from running 100 miles. Because I know in the course of 100 miles, you can have a million ups and downs. So was there, when you're looking back on it, was there a high point and a low point?
Yeah, I think there was definitely a lot of highs and lows. I wouldn't say that there was a particularly one high point that stands out. I think that there were many, and there was a lot of peaks that I hadn't done, and so discovering some of these new areas, for example, the Blanca group I'd never done, thought that was amazing. The Chicago Basin down in the San Juans, the Elks.
I've never been there, but I hear that's just spectacular.
It's absolutely stunning, and it was a monsoon, so it was raining. I was kind of in this complete whiteout fog. I couldn't see anything, but then there would be these little pockets, would open up, and so it's just it was a very cool experience. The Elks too are really dramatic, and I'd never done any of those. So there was a lot of highs in that regard, just kind of experiencing new places. The lows, the start was very stressful because obviously if you're taking off for a month, a lot of things have to line up, in the rest of your life to be able to take that time off. So it's a pretty big privilege to be able to just say, hey, okay, I'm going to take off for a month. But it's also kind of a strain too, in organizing everything. And I did okay at organizing things, but it was a bit like...
You never know until you're out there.
Yeah, and it definitely came down to like the last minute, and I slept a couple hours the night before. Not because I was stressed because of the trip, but because of setting up everything to do the trip.
Sure.
And so I was hoping that wouldn't happen, but it did. And then...
Is that pretty standard? Does it happen every time?
Well, this is just a different...
It's just so much bigger.
Yeah, so it's
logistically.
It will happen kind of every time. But I have things more dialed, say for a 100-miler, I'm much more familiar with the needs and requirements of the race. It's usually a day or so event.
Got it.
So it's just much more familiar.
Sure.
Leaving for a month logistically. It's funny because the gear doesn't really change. All of that doesn't really change. It's just more the scope of how long you're out there that's a bit different. So the start was stressful, and I had this time imperative to get down to Culebra Peak, which is a privately owned peak in the south. And there's 8 peaks along the way from Gold Hill, which is where I live, that made sense to basically...
Which way did you go to get down there?
So I went up Grinnell Pass and did Bierstadt and Evans, and then went down to Pikes Peak via Terrial, and did Pikes Peak from Craig's Campground from the back, and then went to the Crestones from there through Canyon City, and then over to Westcliff, and did the Crestone group, and then biked down to San Luis.
Okay.
And initially I'd planned on potentially doing Lindsay from the east, which is in the Blanca group, but I just, the time constraint there, so I did Hard Rock 10 days before leaving.
And so for people that don't know, Hard Rock is 100-mile race, probably the hardest real race in the world. I mean, wouldn't you say?
I don't know. It's a difficult 100-mile race. It's hard to compare. There's a lot of factors.
It's hard to compare. But when I think of that, I think that is the hardest organized event that there could ever be.
It's definitely a challenging race, and but it's one that I really love, and I've been going back to for many years, and that's in the San Juans. And it just so happened my permitting for Culebra happened late. It was really, really hard to get a hold of the person who was managing the permits, and so they didn't issue any permits for August. So July 30th was the latest that I could get this permit for.
So you had to be there?
So I had to be there on that day. It's a single day.
I wish I'd met you before, because the company I work for, we're listing that property that has Culebra on it for sale.
You are?
We are, and I was down there. And
that's actually great. That's great news. Hopefully the new ownership is a little more...
We'll see what we can do. But man, I wish I'd known that. I could have done my best. But anyway, it all worked out perfectly.
Yeah. It was just challenging because you have this set date, and there's they run the mountain, so it's I'm just going to comply to what the restrictions are. But because of doing Hard Rock and having that set up, and I was hoping to start in August, but now I had to start, later in July, still kind of recover from the race, which actually didn't go well. But anyway, my family was in town. So there was a number of factors that led to the start being pretty stressful and having these first 5 days getting down to Culebra being super, super intense. So it was kind of like sleeping a couple hours a night and just really kind of going for it. Because if you do miss, say, the Crestone group, it's another 100 miles back from Culebra to go and do that. So on a bike, that's quite a bit of, you know, a sort of additional strain. But it all worked out. And so that was, I wouldn't say that was a low point, but it kind of started things in a more
kind of hyped up, stressed out
way, where, you know, the ideal of the trip is sort of this like kind of simple, you know, I'm just kind of going and riding my bike in my backyard and going up some peaks. And so that was set the tone in a little bit of a strange way to start. And then there was a lot of rain in the San Juans, the monsoons, thunderstorms. There's a lot of mental stress around, you know, when I was able to go up the peaks. So there's a lot of stop and go, and the rhythm was quite difficult because I would go up to tree line, wait for a storm to blow, you know, to come through, run up the peak, run off it because the next storm's coming through. And so there was a lot of like wait, you know, and then pick a moment, go, charge back down, that kind of thing. So that was a little intense. But the real low point, sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded answer.
No, I love this. Why I wanted to hear it all.
Yeah, the real low point was, so about halfway I reached the Swatch. So the southern part of the Swatch after the San Juans.
And so for people that don't know, that's the valley from Leadville down to Salida.
Exactly, yeah. And so the way my sort of route worked out was that I came out of the San Juans into Lake City. So left Lake City, and it's rough. It's a little over 100 miles, about 110 miles to Antero. So I actually wrapped around the north side of Antero, where the road goes up.
Oh, sure, yeah, I've been up there.
And what my plan there was to do Antero, and Tabaguach and Chavano as a three together, which I think was a good decision logistically. But it also kind of marked the halfway point and also familiar terrain for me. So I think I got there feeling pretty good, excited that I was kind of heading north and home, and, you know, and let down my guard a little bit. And so when I started up Tabaguach and Chavano, it wasn't quite as easy as I wanted it to be, and I really felt that cumulative fatigue, and then Antero is a very uninspiring peak. There's a road to the top. There's a lot of quads, and it's just messy, you know. It's and so I was just in a bad headspace, really, and so it wasn't even bonking. It was just this core depletion of just.
How many days in were you at that point?
So this was probably it's, you know, a couple weeks. I'm not exactly sure, you know, give or take a few days there. So it's right around, and I think that is 30. The San Juans, I believe, is 27. When you completed the San Juans was 27. So those three kind of brought me up to 30. You know, which is right around the halfway point. And I just kind of felt like the wear and tear of that intense start, the mental strain of the sort of the weather through the San Juans, and just the kind of cumulative volume there, kind of all came down upon me at once. And the funny thing is I biked up to 12,000 feet to stage Antero, so it would be a little bit easier. I thought, okay, if I can get the bike up there, camp. It was a good decision, but it was also really cold because you're above tree line. The ground's harder. Didn't have a sleeping pad or anything, and so it was that put. And
no tent. You were just in a bivy sack.
Yeah, right? So bivy sack and sleeping bag, which actually worked really, really well as long as I was, you know, on the pine needles, you know, under the trees, and most of Colorado, like, that's fairly easy to find. But on Antero and Princeton, both of those you can go up the road to 12,000 feet, and so I camped there, and both of those nights were definitely the coldest, and one of the few nights I actually didn't sleep that well. Nearly every other night I was just so exhausted, and I was quite warm and found nice little spots and just went straight to sleep. So I think the mix of just the accumulation and also just the familiarity of being back in like a place that I know. So I kind of
let your guard down a little bit.
Yeah, you do that, and then you know exactly like this how big the climb is. Whereas when you're discovering, it can go on and on sometimes and be a little bit demoralizing, but it's also like new.
Sure.
So you're like, well, oh, there it is, cool. Whereas here it's like, no, I know this is the full summit or whatever.
That's rough, man.
So that was challenging. And
do you have any techniques that you developed over the years for coming out of those kind of dark spots where your brain starts getting the best of you? Because I would imagine that's kind of part of your job is grinding through that. So is there a technique you use?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, a lot of it's actually quite. I've moved. Over the years, I've sort of come to a place where I feel like I can rationalize what's happening to me, and so sleep deprivation makes you usually pretty negative and kind of like a little bit angsty, and your body's fighting. Basically your recovery system, and all you want to do is close your eyes and lay down and let your body just and you're fighting that. And I think the awareness of the process of what's happening to you is very helpful. And this is something I really noticed during the Arizona Trail Race, which is a mountain bike race across Arizona.
How many miles?
It's 750 miles.
And you did that?
In April.
Okay.
And that was kind of part of the preparation for this.
Sure.
Was I wanted to do a long bike packing race and dial in some of the gear.
Sure.
It's pretty challenging. It was in a completely new environment for me in the desert.
Yep.
So there's all these things I wanted to sort of practice. And it's a very interesting, beautiful environment. The ecosystems down there, like in the Sonoran Desert, are absolutely phenomenal.
I've never been there, but I've heard it's just unbelievable.
It really is.
Completely different, but it's just amazing.
Yeah, and you go from the desert, and then you move up to sort of Flagstaff into more the high country, and then you go to the canyon, and you finish with this crossing the Grand Canyon, carrying your bike on your back, and it's a really remarkable experience.
Cool.
But during that event, I remember doing a lot of self-talk around you're just sleep deprived, like you're tired, you're worked, and just having that little inner kind of conversation about what I'm going through was really helpful.
Being able to kind of look at yourself from a third party perspective.
Yeah, and just like these people are just hiking. They're not they're not like out there to mock you or anything, or because you're just like what are these people? And they're just out for a hike, man. And
I'm glad to know you get a little bit of that, because I get that in me a lot and I feel bad. So I'm glad to know you get it.
Well, it's just it's a strange thing, because it is really driven by the fact that it's like trying to make decisions before going to bed. It's best to just sleep on it, see how you feel in the morning, and then maybe make your decisions. And I feel like because you're constantly lacking sleep, your perception of people and your or just anything really is very warped.
Oh yeah.
And so having an awareness that you're in a kind of a compromised state is pretty helpful. And then it's trying to find any time I would lay down at night, just really valuing that recovery, like kind of just sinking in, and you're not distracted by anything, because you're out there like in the so you don't have your computer or TV.
That's
or,
so nice.
or whatever it is. It's just like I lay down, all my body wants to do is sleep, and just you sort of really dive into that and really accept that. And so those kinds of even if it's for 2 hours, it sounds ridiculous, but it's that 2 hours is incredible, because your body's craving it so much. And if you really focus on, making it so that it's, nourishing and helps you recover, then it does,
Oh yeah. Do you meditate?
I don't, not seated meditation. I think there's a lot of parallels with, things that I do.
It sounds like, a lot of what you're saying sounds like the benefits people get from meditation. That's why, I guess it is, in a way, it is a type of meditation.
Yeah, I would say not in a, I don't meditate in a formal sense of doing seated meditation every day or something like that. But there is, I think, techniques that are applicable, such as, breathing. So that's something that I'll just kind of sit there and, okay, just focus on breathing right now. Do something that's really easy to not, I guess, not intellectualizing too much and not getting too,
thinking ahead. Like you were saying, you knew exactly how much you had to do in that range.
Yeah.
And not going there.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of giving yourself a chance a little bit. Like it's being kind to yourself, really. Like you're doing something that's hard. And so just give yourself a bit of a break too. And just say like, okay, I can, this is okay. Like I'm doing all right, and it's just focusing on anything that you can sort of improve.
That stuff works.
It does.
It really does. I saw an interview years ago with Jason Schlarb, the runner, and he was talking about Run Rabbit Run and when he won it the first time, and it was an I Run Far interview, and the guy was asking how did he do it, and he said he forces himself to smile.
Yeah.
And I've done 100, I've done a bunch of 50s. It's more like walking than running, but my technique used to be grit my teeth and almost get angry, like hurry up, go, don't be, But I changed to that smiling and force it, and it made the biggest difference and so much more efficient use of energy. In my world.
I think it's a good point, and for me, there's a lot of it's just about observing. Sometimes I'm feeling rage, and it's not my default at all. It's not. I'm not somebody who's like, that's just not who I am really. But it comes up sometimes, and so I think it was interesting on this trip to just observe kind of what your body's going through when
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And your mind too.
Yeah, you can be very vulnerable and just opening up to those things, and you're by yourself, so there's not, your analysis is limited because it's you don't necessarily have that outside perspective. Sure. But at the same time, you can still kind of look at yourself and observe yourself and think like, okay, I'm reacting in this way because of this. And all of a sudden, it's a slight shift in perspective that makes all the difference.
Snaps you out of it just a little bit.
And it's hard sometimes. I think that there's triggers, like someone would honk at me on the road or something, and it's complete like irrational response to it, like I'm allowed to, like sort of right this way, and but then I think like, okay, just calm down. You're just in this state of being a little bit on edge, but it's also a really interesting moment to sort of observe your reactions and how you're feeling. So I spend a lot of time actually, in this kind of process of self-analysis.
I do too.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's refreshing, but it's also a little bit frustrating. Is that you're never going to figure it out. Mm-hmm. Until your dying day, you're always going to be. You get more data, you can figure out how you act a little bit more, and then move on. You're always getting better, but you're never fixed. You never got it all figured out.
Which is, I think, what's compelling about the getting out there and challenging yourself in these different ways. Sure. Because there is so much to learn, and it is a continuous sort of like opportunity to sort of. That's
exactly why I do it. I mean, obviously, it's on a preschool level compared to what you do, but. It's for that. It's for the mental, the mental growth you get from it. Because you can just go to the gym and lift weights or whatever and get in shape. But for me personally, the mental growth and just kind of everything you were saying, being able to observe your mind and just become a better person. That's why.
Totally. I do it. And I think there's, it's all stepping stones. Like I don't think there's any better or, there's the place that you are in your life at this point in time. Mm-hmm. So I feel that to me, this project corresponded to kind of where I was or where I am in life. And so it was a reasonable challenge, but it was definitely a challenge. It was definitely something that was going to pull me out of my comfort zone and make me grow and learn something. If I'd done this, 5-10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have had the same mental disposition to be able to do it. and it might have been nearly too difficult, not necessarily physically, but just mentally. I don't know if I would have been in the right headspace to kind of to be there or to really grow from it. It could have been quite a miserable experience if I wasn't ready for it. I thought that after the Arizona Trail, I was like, this was the right time to do it.
Okay,
like I just kind of mentally it was exactly sort of where I needed to be to do this event. Had I done it even the year before, like last year, I don't know necessarily if it would have worked out the way it did.
So it seems like you're obviously setting physical goals for these big events and everything from the Hard Rock to the 14ers, and it seems like you've done that for years. But so you're obviously goal oriented, but you also seem to be very process oriented and in the moment oriented. So how do you balance those two? Because I would think, especially when this is how you make your living, it could be very easy to just get completely focused on the goal and nothing else. So how have you found a way to balance it? Because you really seem to be able to enjoy it even in the hardest parts.
Yeah, I think the goal offers a framework. It's basically a commitment that I think that in one of the questions you mentioned related to this was, say, like the book, taking a picture every day.
That's like I've noticed you'll have goals like that. Take a picture every day, or write a certain amount every day. Which I think is really, I do that same kind of stuff.
Well, the cool thing about it is that the objective, I guess, is to try and reach that goal of being able to take a photo every day. But then the process, the 365 days of doing it, is what becomes the learning experience.
Sure.
At the end, well, I've finished it. It's done. And sure, but it's actually the process, and as it's unfolding, when you're really learning to, say, hone your craft, or you're learning
it's a practice.
Exactly.
Daily practice. That
daily practice, I think, is what's transformative. If you're also focusing on, a single event, a single day, or a single moment as your objective, if for whatever reason that doesn't happen, then, what's the point? Like, you could get injured. There could be like a terrible weather. It could be, the event could be canceled. I don't know. Like, you could get sick. There's just all these reasons why the actual goal could not, be attained, basically. And so if your only focus is projecting towards that, then you kind of forget about the process. And then you get there and you're disappointed because you've dropped out of the race, or so to me, it's like making the process, I would say, interesting. Enjoyment is only one part of the equation in my mind.
I heard a quote from somebody recently that said people often confuse comfort and happiness.
Yeah, that's a good quote.
And I think that's especially true in what you do, because there's a lot of times you're not comfortable and you're not happy out there, but when you add it all up at the end of the day or the end of the month, you're fairly content with it, I would think.
Totally. And I think it's there's a lot of complexity to life, and there's a lot of interesting things outside of just having fun. And I think that is part of it, and I take a lot of joy out of running and climbing and biking and all these things, but it's the same with, say, reading or taking photos or things like that. It's not always just fun. There's this other learning kind of component to it.
You got to be stretching that comfort zone,
right?
You have to.
Yeah, and so I think it's important to see in the process that. I don't know. I'd be surprised if anyone would just go out for even, a casual run and say the whole time it was just absolute, complete bliss, of just sort of, and it's great. Sometimes maybe that does happen occasionally, but for the most part,
it's an exception.
Yeah, the process. There's something interesting about effort and kind of being a little bit uncomfortable, and you learn from that. And I just. I don't know. I think that's what's fulfilling at the end of the day. I
love Yvon Chouinard, the guy who started Patagonia. I just think he's such an interesting guy. And I think all the advice he gives is counter to the normal business advice you learn in business school, whatever. And I saw a quote from him one time, and he was talking about process versus goal, ends versus means. And he said, in the end, everybody's dead. Right. So the only thing that matters is process. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it. A little gruff, but interesting. And true.
No, I mean, it's completely true. And I think it's funny because you say like I'm a goal-oriented person. I actually wouldn't describe myself that way. Mm-hmm. I set goals, but it's really a framework. And
has that changed when you were, say, 10 years ago?
No, not at all. Yeah, I've always been very much about the process. But it's also just, it doesn't mean that I don't take the goal seriously.
Sure. And you just see it as a framework or as it's a reason to let you have these experiences moving towards it.
Yeah, it's kind of having a vision and being able to project and say, well, this is an ideal sort of, trying to be like a better person, for example.
Sure.
You want an ideal. You want something of like you'd look at, say, I don't know, like the Dalai Lama and say, wow, that's an exemplary human being. Somebody who you could aspire to be like. But you don't want to be the Dalai Lama. You want to be yourself with traits that are, noble or that are, and so it's kind of working towards, I think, just an ideal, which is where the goal comes in.
That makes sense.
Like working towards, and it can be something as basic as like working towards a time or a finish or something at a race, to put it in the endurance context.
Yeah.
And that's a nice way to say, okay, because I'm shooting for this, I'm going to have to elevate my process. Right? I'm going to have to get better because my goal is this higher aspiration, and so it pushes the process. So they kind of both feed each other, really,
Very cool. You need to write a book about this stuff. More people need to hear it. So I'm very interested in your background as well and kind of how you came to this outlook you have. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in France. My parents moved to France when I was 6 years old. And my sister was 1, so I have a little sister.
Okay.
And they're both English teachers, and they moved from the UK. I was born in Oxford, England.
Okay.
And lived in France essentially through college. I went to college in France.
Okay.
And then did an exchange program to Durango, to Fort Lewis College.
Oh, nice. And
met my wife there. And I also had some family in the U.S. So there was a kind of a connection there as well.
How did having that international perspective from a young kid, how did that affect your outlook?
I think it affected a lot because it was interesting being in France growing up. I was always considered like the Brit. We were never really. I was there at such a young age, learned the language, as completely bilingual, and it wasn't, you're not trying, you're just put into. I was put into school when I was 6 and
figured it out.
Yeah, and that's what you do. And when you're that age, it's quite easy to learn quickly. But I was a little bit always and my family was that way. We were always like, oh, you're the English people, And then we would go back to the UK, and it was like, oh, but. You're the Frenchies kind of thing. But even on a practical level, we didn't follow really. My parents didn't have all the sort of French cultural things at home, like music or it's just not what they grew up with. They grew up with a British background. So that was an interesting mix of always feeling like a bit of a visitor, in places. But it also made me feel just kind of comfortable in that.
Versatile.
Yeah.
Plug in where you need.
Exactly. I think it definitely helps with being more flexible with travel and meeting people and just understanding other cultures and just because you have had to do that. I've had to do that, from a very young age. It's something that somewhat comes naturally, to have that flexibility.
I wish there was a way that kids could be required, or even 18 to 22-year-olds be required to spend 6 months in a foreign country, because I feel like
it's amazing, the
amount of personal growth and the broadening of your perspective.
Well, the funny thing is after high school, I finished high school. So when I was 18, and then I went to I took a gap year nice. And came to the U.S. for a year.
Where did you end up?
my grandparents were living in Indianapolis at the time, so I spent 6 months there, and then I went to California to travel, and then I traveled on the East Coast too. So I worked for 6 months, saved up some money, and then just kind of did this big. I was into rollerblading, and
it was big back then.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was going. I traveled around to do that, and then it kind of just opened my eyes to a lot of things. Like I did on the East Coast, I went to all these different, all the museums and all the sites, and it just got really. I was reading a lot at the time, and it just being in that different environment and having all that sort of new stimulation really hit me, But what was interesting, it was for the French, it's really odd to take a gap year.
Is it really?
Yeah. So it was this thing like, oh no, you could have this hole in your resume, and I was like, I'm 18. I don't have a resume. Like I sort of, So that was an interesting conflict.
Who do you credit with giving you the confidence to say, well, I don't have a resume, or the, I guess, confidence or maturity? It seems like you had a more mature outlook. You did more. You definitely did than when I was 18.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
Your folks?
I think in retrospect, I can think about it it seems sort of mature, but in my mind, it was like, cool, I'm going to go to California, to go skating, So I think as a kid, I mean, there was definitely points of kind of, I don't know, not awakening, that's a bit strong, but of moments of realizing oh yeah, there's a bigger world out there. I would probably credit my grandfather in the US. I remember him telling me you got to stop kind of messing around with this skating stuff and kind of become a man basically. And it didn't really hit me until I left and started traveling by myself and exploring, and then it kind of was like, oh yeah, there is this bigger world out there that's because I grew up in it's a fairly small little community, and you get that small town kind of feel, and you but still being fortunate to travel to the UK and some to the US, and so I was exposed a little bit in that way. But yeah, my mom's been, maybe when my parents came over to France, it was a pretty, I wouldn't say risky decision, but it was definitely a decision that involved kind of selling the house that they had, and basically coming over with a truckload of stuff and starting to teach English and hope that it worked out. So that was kind of an ambitious decision, and
with a family in tow.
Yeah, with the kids, and my
that's
sister.
A whole different deal there.
Yeah, it's two of us, but it was quite simple, And the other thing that's important is to say is that the French system kind of allows that. There's a lot of help for if you break your leg, you're taken care of. There's not the same precarious kind of lifestyle that, the US has all these opportunities and everything's very open and all of that, but man, if something goes wrong, it's kind of all on you. Whereas
you're on your own.
Yeah, the French system, it's school's free, and then the healthcare system, and so there's a lot of these basic needs that allow you to be pretty minimal, I guess, in your lifestyle, and that you're going to be sort of taken care of.
My wife and I lived in Central America for a year for her work, and that was and I was 30 when we moved there, 31.
Yeah.
And it was a life-changing experience. It's Costa Rica. It's not like we're living in sub-Saharan Africa or something.
Sure.
But just the simplicity of it. Yeah. That was the biggest takeaway I took. And, you come back here and you go to the grocery store and there's 3 aisles of bottled water.
Yeah.
Do we really need all this?
It's an interesting, on one hand, there's all these opportunities, and it's everything's there is that kind of the American dream sort of concept that you can kind of do whatever, but it's not that simple. I think it's not that.
The global perspective allows you to pick and choose. And you don't just accept the system because it's the system. You can kind of question it and act accordingly, or at least that was my indication. So you were talking about your mother. Did I see on social media recently that she ran 100 miles?
She did.
So awesome.
It is awesome. It's just kind of.
How old is she?
She is. She was born in '58. So what's that?
62? No.
Not quite, right? Is it wait.
Two, really?
58, right?
58. Yeah, that's right.
58.
Yeah.
My math's terrible.
Man, I can't do math without Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. Well, there we go. So my mom's 58. Yeah, and so she started running in her, I think it was early 50s, so not so long ago.
That is awesome.
And did a couple half marathons, did a few marathons, and then some 50Ks. And I think that the big thing was that she was just very casual about it, but genuinely interested. So genuinely, there was this kind of intrinsic motivation to do it.
Yep.
So it wasn't anybody forcing her to go out and run. It was just kind of like, oh, this is fun. She joined a running club group in town, and there's a great group of people, and then would come to my races and support that. And yeah, just gradually got more and more into it. And I remember, I think it was last year, she said, I just kind of want to see what it feels like to run for 30 hours. And I was
so
like,
cool.
Wow, that's awesome. And it was, I knew that she could do it. Like mentally, she's just kind of, she's really strong that way and can commit to, a project. And I think it just comes a lot. It's she's a very genuine person. So when she's saying that she wants to do this, there's no ego involved.
That's rare.
Yeah, it's just very much of I want to do this and see if I'm capable kind of doing it. So I think
that's where your process must come from. That sounds very similar to your outlook.
It is, yeah. I think there's that genuine kind of piece that I think really helps, because when things do get hard, you're sort of out there. I think you can feel like you're out there for the right reasons.
Sure.
And it was hard. She had some IT band issues and had to walk a lot, but just kind of embraced it and got it done, and had a great experience. So yeah, I'm super, proud of her, and just like happy that she experienced that.
That's cool. That is a huge. No matter how you shake it out, that is a huge accomplishment. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So your family obviously has had a huge influence on you. Do you have any other mentors or role models? And they could be people you've read about or people you actually know. When you think about people you admire, does anybody come to mind? Dalai Lama, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I think it's a lot of people depending on the period in my life and different moments in time.
Sure.
There's just times when I'll read something that just really resonates with me. I don't idolize people. I feel like there's I'm inspired by what people do, and so it can be anything from just a friend doing something really thoughtful, or really
sure.
Genuine and kind, and being like, oh, that's a really good quality.
Yeah.
I can think of you might know Jeff Rose.
Yeah.
From
I don't know him, but I know exactly who he is.
Yeah, he's somebody that just kind of comes to mind, and just how he carries himself as a person is very. He's a very kind person, very genuine person. And there's a number of friends like that I really look up to, just their quality, as people. So there's obviously the bigger picture, great ideas, sort of, people have written great things.
Sure.
But for me, what speaks to me more is maybe that more direct, genuine connection with people, where I can just appreciate those qualities, and that kind of inspires me, and think, oh man, you should be trying to be a little bit better person, or
sure.
Just so.
I think that's more effective, really, because if you're surrounded by these people that you really admire, and that you can make these small changes to be more like them. Versus I'm obsessed with Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah. And no matter what happens, I'm not going to be like
right.
And so I think that's a really good approach to take on that. We've mentioned reading a ton. I usually ask the book questions towards the end, but are there any specific books that have played a big role in your outlook on things? I mean, I imagine it's, like you were saying, it varies depending on your stage of life. But
yeah, I mean, I've there's Satish Kumar. He's the editor of Resurgence magazine and The Ecologist, which is published in the UK.
Okay.
He used to be a Jain monk.
Oh wow!
And has an absolutely fascinating story. And one of his I think his first book was called No Destination, and it's essentially his autobiography. And I remember reading that at a time where it just really, really resonated with me. And still to this day, I think there's a lot of his writing and just his kind of ideas that have stuck with me. But I mean, there's so many, like, Gary Snyder is always, I think, been very influential for me over the years. Jack Turner has written a book called The Abstract Wild. I'll bring that book up a lot. I think it's a short little read, but it's a really great book, quite radical thoughts about the environment. And there's who else? I read the past couple years, Shadows of the Koyukuk. Have you heard of that book?
I have not heard of that. It's funny because normally when people tell me these books, I've either read them or they're on my list, but none of these are. So this is awesome. Yeah,
that's a book I really enjoyed. Then
Shadow of the what?
Koyukuk.
Okay.
And you'll probably just have to Google it and misspell it, and then it will correct it for you.
Can't do math. I can't spell either, but that's all right.
Yeah. No, that's a really phenomenal read. Mostly I read kind of nonfiction, kind of biography, kind of,
Sure. That's exactly what I do.
Sure,
I wish I could read more fiction, but sometimes I feel like there's such an opportunity to learn stuff in nonfiction, but there is fiction too.
I think fiction's amazing. I don't connect with it as much. For a while, I was really into Hubert Selby Jr., which is super dark, and Last Exit to Brooklyn, kind of I really like his writing style, which is very graphic and a lot of detail, and just he picks really interesting words as descriptors of things. So there's books like that are fiction, that I think are great, but overall, I mean, you only have so much time to read, so I tend to gravitate mostly towards nonfiction.
So a lot of the people who listen to this podcast, they just have a love of the American West, no matter whether they're in the ranching world or the conservation world, writers, athletes, and so a lot of your events and your activities and your lifestyle, it seems to have, you obviously have a love of wild places, love of Colorado, love of the West, and then it seems like there's some sort of conservation ethic going through it that kind of threads them all together.
Sure.
Self-powered adventures.
Yeah.
So what does the word conservation mean to you? Because it can mean a million different things to a million people.
Yeah, I think for me it's an understanding of kind of the relationship that people have with the land, and essentially just understanding like the history of the land and history of the people that live here, and kind of our interdependence with the land. A really basic example is so we live in Gold Hill. And we have a 14-foot hand-dug well, and that's our water supply. And so, it's filled by, the water table, and, you can kind of look down the well and see exactly where things are at, And it's been an interesting relationship with water, and just kind of, it's not just when you turn on the faucet, it's coming from right in the backyard, rather than, so there's you're sort of bridging a little bit that gap of the disconnect that you can have in a city with city water, just turning on the faucet and there's water.
Sure.
And when we run out of water, or if during the floods, when everything's sort of oversaturated and you see the water table is really high, you just get a really close connection to what's going on. And I think that is one of the kind of central parts of like sort of how I look at conservation, is trying to kind of understand the processes and be in contact with the process, you know. And then the more that happens, I think the more that you can have like this appreciation for wanting to preserve resources, not so much as relics and things to just kind of like fence off and look at, but how we interrelate, you know.
Yeah, find that balance between
Yeah.
responsible use and then keeping it around for future generations.
Yeah, and you know, I think the, you know, like the Dakota pipeline and the indigenous peoples, like response to that as protectors of the waters, and you know, and that's something I can really relate to, and you know, so I would say that's sort of how I would frame my you know.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I agree with all that. So I've got we've already been talking for close to an hour. I can't believe that. So I don't want to take all your time, even though I definitely could drill you with questions for the rest of the day. So I've got some of these kind of quick questions that I go through. You don't have to give quick answers, but is there back to books real quick, is there a favorite book you have related to the West, the American West?
I mean, Gary Snyder's poetry probably.
Cool.
I think would be you know, top of my list.
That's great.
Yeah, David Gessner recently wrote the what is it called?
All the While That Remains.
Yeah,
so good.
Yeah, it's a great book. Actually, his previous book, The Prophet of Dry Hill. Have you read that?
No, I haven't read that.
That's
I've read all of his other books, though.
Yeah, so it's about John Hay, and it's just I really like his style of writing. Yeah,
he's hilarious.
Yeah.
Have you read My Green Manifesto?
I haven't. No.
That's good.
Okay.
That's really good.
I'll check that out.
So he lives in North Carolina, and he teaches at UNC Wilmington. And one of my good buddies is a very talented writer, and Gessner was his professor.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm actually going to try to get him on the podcast.
Great.
Because that All the While That Remains, I think, is one of the best overviews of issues related to the American West that I've ever read, combined with a double biography.
Right. Yeah, really good read. Very just dynamic kind of. Yeah,
that's a great one. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite documentaries or films?
Oh gosh. I'm sure there is some. Nothing really comes to mind right now.
That's probably good. You're not staring at screens all day long.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely watch. You know, I watch Netflix and all. You know, that kind of stuff. Sure. But it's nothing really standing out quite right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Is there some other activity you enjoy that people listening would be surprised to hear you enjoy?
I guess rollerblading, but I don't.
You still do it?
No. I haven't.
You should break them out.
Yeah, I should. I haven't skated in like literally probably, I don't know, 12 years, 10.
Those things disappeared. They were awesome.
Yeah, but it is a thing that I occupied a lot of my teenage years, you know, and so it was.
Like what kind of stuff? Tricks like.
Yeah. I mean, it was the '90s, you know, and that was what was happening, you know, and
those things were fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. So. But I mean, it's not really an activity that I don't do it anymore or anything. But that was a fun thing as a kid.
Oh yeah, definitely. So this will be interesting. What's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you in the outdoors? It could be scary. It could be funny. Just some weird.
Yeah, I think probably stalked by a mountain lion on Mount Rainier.
Really?
For an hour and a half. That was
you could see the mountain.
Yeah. We just I was running the Wonderland Trail, and it was in the middle of the night, and it was a full moon, so we'd kind of go in and out these, in and out of the trees, and you can just see this mountain lion. So that was a pretty stressful moment. Just it's funny because there was no aggression from the cat or anything. It was more just the fact that it's following me, and then also just all your preconceived notions of what it could do.
And then it's dark on top of that.
Yeah, and and I was depleted and tired, and because I've just been running, all day, and so it was this definitely a difficult situation.
I've never seen a mountain lion. I've seen every other animal, but I've never seen one, and I've heard that's a good thing because if you see it, it wants to be seen.
Yeah, there's one on Sunshine that you might be able to catch. You can see it on the it has a collar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's female and big cat. And with my wife and I, driving up Sunshine Canyon, we've seen it a couple times, and she's big, but you can she's got the big collar on, and I think you can find her online and see. It's kind of
really.
Yeah,
I'll look that up.
And there's some. there's she has kittens every year, and so there's some spots,
I'll put links to all these things we talk about in the notes. So I'll put a link to the cat. There was one that was in the alley back there a year or two ago behind my house. And everybody kept seeing it, and then a few days later, all these signs went up around the neighborhood. It said "Missing Peaches the cat."
Ooh,
I think Peaches was an appetizer for that guy.
Yeah,
scary. This is kind of a nerdy question, but I'm interested to hear is there one piece of gear you have that it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just a piece of gear that you can't live without? Like for me, I have the Houdini jacket by Patagonia.
Yeah.
And it's just so simple, but it's so awesome.
Yeah.
And I use it every time I go out. I take it with me. Is there some piece like that for you?
Well, I would probably say my shoes, actually, just because they are like sort of your connection to the ground, and
it's the foundation of everything you do.
Yeah, so in when you're running in the mountains, it's kind of the rubber, the grip, all of that. It's if there was a single piece of gear that's kind of essential, I think it kind of starts there for me,
definitely.
And there's other things that I think are comparable in terms of importance, like a little windbreaker like that is actually something that I would carry with me most of the time. But yeah, I'd probably start with a good pair of running shoes.
That makes sense.
And
so the shoes that you're running in now, they'll be out in the spring. Is that what you said?
That's the one model that I used for the first part of the trip, the Scarpa Spin, and then the Atoms are available right now.
Okay, I'll put links to those too.
Yeah.
If you had to pick, this is a hard one, your favorite location in the American West, specific mountain, trail, town, lake, is there one spot that comes to mind?
Mountain, I'd go Longs Peak.
Yeah.
I really like where I live.
So
like I said, with the 14ers, it was like I love Colorado. I've always loved Colorado. I first came here when I was 12 years old to Aspen, actually, with my grandparents for a short vacation.
Oh, nice.
And remember just being kind of completely enamored by the bells, and then when I moved to Durango for the year on the exchange program, was like, wow, it's just always I've had this connection with Colorado. So but as far as mountains, Longs Peak, it's the closest to home. I think it's a really amazing mountain, and it's complex. It's got a lot going for it. So
that's a good one. Yeah. If you had to say what you think the biggest challenge or opportunity facing the American West in the next 20 years, what would you say it is?
I think the privatization of land. I think that is of the selling of public lands is a huge topic right now, and could be extremely problematic.
Yes.
I think it redefines everything, basically.
It does.
And so I think that in terms of that will influence everything else.
Yes.
I think the opportunity is to basically realize how important it is to keep these lands public.
Sure.
And reaffirm why that's the case from the start. And so I think that to me is one of the pivotal sort of
I agree with that. And nobody's mentioned that. Brady Robinson, the executive director of the Access Fund, he briefly mentioned that. We kind of ran out of time, and so I'll put some links to that, because that's a huge issue.
It's a huge issue. I mean, water is the first thing that would come to mind, but I think beyond that, this would just change things so dramatically in a way that I don't think we even realize quite how bad it would be.
Well, and water is such a broad issue, and it's hard for people to get their heads around it, but this is an issue that is pressing right now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good info online about what the implications would be, so I think that's a very timely one.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll get it figured out. And so one more question, or two more questions. If you could make a request of the people listening to this, and again, just people who love the American West, what would it be?
A request. I think just to to get outside and enjoy, enjoy this amazing area that we live in.
I agree.
And treat it respectfully.
That's how you start conservation. I mean, that's how I got started. Is I came out here when I was 16 for a trip at base of Mount Princeton.
Yeah.
And that got it in me, and now I do a lot of land conservation for my job, and I think it's all because I got outside.
Yeah, I think it's not about being preachy. It's just about showing people like the opportunities that are there, and being outside. It's difficult to deny sort of the beauty and the how amazing things are out here. And so I think just getting people exposed to that is great. Get out there.
So how can people connect with you? You've got awesome social media. So what's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, so my website's alpine-works.com, and then all my social media handles are Alpine Works, basically. So most active on Instagram and the website. So, but yeah.
And you write a column for I Run Far?
I do as well. Yeah, so a monthly column called From My Doorstep, which I actually writing.
You're a great writer, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
It's writing is so hard for me. It's kind of like running, It's hard, but it's good.
It is.
It makes me feel good when I'm done with it.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much. That was great.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
So there you go, Joe Grant. Super interesting guy, and I really enjoyed that conversation. I think Joe's interesting on a lot of different levels. Obviously, the athletics is fun to talk about, but the reading and his thoughts on process, his thoughts on goals, all great stuff that I think could be applied to anybody, whether you're into ultra running or not. So thanks, Joe. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a lot going on. Thanks to all of you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. As always, if you know of anybody who would be interesting for me to interview, don't hesitate to reach out. All my contact info is on the webpage. Also, if you have an extra 10 seconds, it'd be great for you to subscribe to the podcast and give it a few 5-star reviews. I understand that does good things for the visibility of the podcast, so I'd appreciate that. More importantly, I'd appreciate it if you just passed it along to folks who may find it interesting. But again, thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. I'll talk with you soon.